A racist cop detains a black army general, convinced he's stolen the car he's driving. But when he makes one call to the Pentagon, everything she thought she knew shatters. This isn't just any traffic stop, and he's not just any driver. What starts as a routine detention becomes a deadly race against time, with secrets buried deeper than anyone imagined. The cop has no idea that her actions are about to trigger something that will change everything. And when the truth finally comes out about who this man really is and what he's carrying, the consequences will be explosive. What happens when that one call connects? And why is this detention the only thing standing between safety and catastrophe? Every time I see your comments, it reminds me how stories connect us all. Let me know where you're watching from, and let's get started. The late afternoon sun bathed Main Street in Millbrook with a golden glow as General Timothy Wellington guided his modest silver rental car through the quiet town. His weathered hands rested easily on the steering wheel, though his mind was far from at ease. The classified intelligence about tomorrow's planned attack weighed heavily on him, even as he tried to focus on the joy of his daughter's upcoming wedding. "Just need to make it to the rehearsal on time," he murmured to himself, glancing at the dashboard clock reading 5:15 in the evening. The church steeple was visible in the distance, a beacon of hope and normalcy in a day that felt anything but normal. The flash of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror caught him by surprise. Timothy checked his speed, 42 in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. With practiced calm, he signaled and pulled over to the curb, positioning the rental car perfectly parallel to the sidewalk. Officer Patricia Kendrick emerged from the patrol car, her face set in hard lines as she approached. Her younger partner, Officer Danny Torres, followed a few steps behind, notepad in hand. Timothy noticed the rookie's uncertain expression, so different from his partner's stern demeanor. "License and registration," Kendrick barked before even reaching the driver's window. Her hand rested purposefully on her holstered weapon. "Of course, officer," Timothy replied evenly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he reached for his wallet. Years of military service had taught him how to maintain composure in tense situations. "The rental agreement is in the glove compartment." "Rental agreement?" Kendrick's voice dripped with suspicion. "Sure it is. Step out of the vehicle." Timothy's heart sank, but he complied without argument. "Ma'am, I can explain." "Hands where I can see them," Kendrick interrupted, her voice rising. "Torres, call in the plate." Danny shifted uncomfortably, his young face clouded with concern. "Officer Kendrick, maybe we should—" "Call it in," she snapped, cutting him off. Timothy stood perfectly still, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. "Officer, I'm General Timothy Wellington, United States Army. I have proper identification and all necessary documentation for this vehicle." Kendrick's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Torres, check the car for weapons while I run this ID, which is probably fake." Danny hesitated, his dark eyes meeting Timothy's for a brief moment. The general saw recognition there, not of his face, but of the injustice unfolding. "Ma'am?" Timothy tried again, his voice steady and dignified. "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm on my way to my daughter's wedding rehearsal. I'm happy to provide any additional verification you need." "Save it," Kendrick growled, snatching his license and military ID. "I've heard every excuse in the book. No way this car was legally rented." The tension grew as passing cars slowed to stare. Timothy remained motionless, his mind racing between the critical intelligence he carried and his daughter waiting at the church. He could feel the weight of the classified documents in his breast pocket, but revealing their existence would only complicate matters. Danny cleared his throat. "Officer Kendrick, dispatch confirmed the rental car belongs to Enterprise. Everything checks out." "Run the ID again," Kendrick insisted, her face flushing. "There has to be something wrong here." Timothy watched the young officer's internal struggle play across his face. Danny Torres straightened his shoulders, seeming to come to a decision. "Ma'am, his military ID is legitimate. 3-star general, currently active duty. We have no reason to detain him." Danny's voice was respectful but firm. Kendrick spun to face her partner, her gray hair escaping its severe bun. "You don't tell me how to do my job, rookie." I've been on the force for 15 years, and I know what a stolen vehicle looks like. What exactly makes you so sure this vehicle is stolen, officer? Timothy asked quietly, his calm question cutting through her anger. The question hung in the air between them. Danny's eyes widened slightly as the implication became clear, and even Kendrick seemed to falter for a moment. I don't have to explain myself to you, she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Stay right there while I verify these credentials. Timothy noticed her hands shaking slightly as she walked back to the patrol car. The classified documents felt like they were burning a hole in his pocket, and precious minutes were ticking away. But he knew that rushing or escalating the situation would only make things worse. Danny stepped closer, keeping his voice low. I'm sorry about this, sir. It's not right. Thank you, son, Timothy replied softly. Sometimes the hardest thing is standing up for what's right, especially to those we're supposed to respect. The young officer nodded, conflict evident in his expression as he watched his partner in the patrol car, presumably running Timothy's credentials for a third time. Officer Kendrick stormed back from the patrol car, her face twisted with frustration. Phone, hand it over, now. Ma'am, I need to maintain access to my phone for urgent military communications, General Wellington explained calmly, though his concern was mounting. The intelligence about tomorrow's attack needed to reach command within the hour. I said hand it over! Kendrick's voice rose sharply. She thrust out her hand, fingers trembling with barely contained anger. You're interfering with a police investigation. That's grounds for arrest. Wellington carefully weighed his options. Making a scene would only escalate the situation, but every minute that passed put more lives at risk. With deliberate movements, he reached into his pocket and retrieved his phone. Officer Kendrick, he tried one more time. I am General Timothy Wellington, commanding officer of… Save your fairy tales, she snapped, snatching the phone from his hand. A general? Right, and I suppose you've got the president on speed dial too? Officer Torres shifted his weight uncomfortably, his young face creased with worry. Ma'am, his credentials checked out multiple times. Maybe we should… You're too green to understand, Torres. Kendrick cut him off. These scammers are getting better with their fake IDs, but they all slip up eventually. She turned back to Wellington, her voice dripping with disdain. And this one's about to slip up big time. Wellington maintained his composed demeanor, though his heart raced as he thought about the classified documents in his jacket pocket. He couldn't risk them being discovered during a search, but he also couldn't allow hundreds of lives to be lost because he failed to deliver the intelligence in time. Officer, Wellington said, his deep voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of military command. I understand you're doing your job, but I need to make an urgent call to my superior officer. Lives literally depend on it. Oh, that's rich. Kendrick laughed harshly. Now you're not just pretending to be a general, you're trying to play hero too? She waved his phone mockingly. Let me guess, you're on a secret mission to save the world? Torres took a tentative step forward. Officer Kendrick, protocol states that we should allow detained individuals to make necessary phone calls. Protocol? Kendrick whirled on her partner. You want to talk about protocol? How about the protocol for dealing with suspected car thieves? How about the protocol for handling uncooperative suspects who spin wild stories about being military officers? Wellington watched the young officer's internal struggle play across his face. Torres clearly recognized the injustice unfolding, but felt powerless to stop it. The general understood that feeling all too well. He'd seen it countless times throughout his career. Good people trapped between duty and doing what's right. If you would just verify my identity with the military police, Wellington suggested carefully. They can confirm everything I'm telling you. Military police? Kendrick's voice rose another notch. Listen here, you're this close to spending the night in lockup. Keep pushing, and that's exactly where you'll end up. Wellington glanced at his watch. 5:45 in the evening. The wedding rehearsal would be starting soon, but more importantly, the window for preventing tomorrow's attack was closing rapidly. He needed to contact command within the next 30 minutes to mobilize the necessary response teams. Ma'am, he said, choosing his words with careful precision, I respect your authority and your position, but I am asking you, as someone who has dedicated his life to protecting this country, to please allow me to make one phone call. Just one call to verify everything I'm telling you." For a moment, something flickered in Kendrick's tired eyes, perhaps a glimpse of uncertainty, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the same hard anger that had dominated their entire interaction. "You can make all the calls you want," she said coldly, "after we process you downtown, hands behind your back." "Officer Kendrick," Torres's voice cracked with distress. "This isn't right. His ID is real. The car rental is legitimate. We have no probable cause." "Stand down, Torres," Kendrick barked. "You want to throw away your career defending a car thief? Be my guest, but you better be damn sure you want to make that choice." Wellington stood perfectly still, his mind racing through scenarios. He could overpower both officers if necessary. His military training had more than prepared him for that. But using force against law enforcement would only make the situation worse, potentially derailing both his mission and his daughter's wedding. The classified documents felt heavy in his pocket as Kendrick reached for her handcuffs. Time was running out, lives were hanging in the balance, and his options were quickly disappearing. The general who had commanded thousands of troops and navigated complex international conflicts now found himself powerless in the face of one officer's blind prejudice. Torres watched with growing horror as Kendrick moved to arrest Wellington, his hand hovering uncertainly near his own service weapon. The young officer's face reflected the moral crisis unfolding before him. The choice between following orders and standing up against a clear injustice. As Kendrick reached for her handcuffs, her sleeve pulled back to reveal a worn military memorial bracelet. Wellington caught a glimpse of the name and date engraved on the metal band. PFC Michael Kendrick, KIA 2022. "You military types," Kendrick spat, her voice trembling. "All high and mighty with your ranks and medals, sending our kids off to die while you sit safe behind your desks." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Wellington. Her anger ran deeper than prejudice. It was fueled by raw, unhealed grief. "Officer Kendrick," he said softly, "I'm sorry about your son." She froze, the handcuffs half raised. "You don't know anything about my son." "Private First Class Michael Kendrick," Wellington continued gently. "Your bracelet. I noticed the inscription." Her hand instinctively covered the metal band. "Don't you dare say his name. You have no right." Torres looked between them, understanding dawning on his young face. The tension in the air shifted from hostile to heavy with shared pain. "I lost him in Afghanistan," Kendrick said, her voice cracking. 9 months ago. His unit was supposed to be in a safe zone. That's what his commanding officer promised in every letter. "Don't worry, Mrs. Kendrick, your son is in good hands." She laughed bitterly. "Good hands. They sent him on a patrol that turned into an ambush. He was 20 years old." Wellington felt the weight of her words. Throughout his career, he'd written too many letters to grieving parents, attended too many military funerals. Each loss left an indelible mark on his soul. "The general who commanded his unit," Kendrick continued, anger building again, "sent me a letter, a form letter, probably signed by some assistant, said Michael died a hero, as if that was supposed to make it better." She gripped the handcuffs tighter. "You claim to be a general? Then you're just like him, treating our children like pawns in your war games." "Patricia," Torres said quietly, using her first name for the first time, "this isn't going to bring Michael back." "Shut up," she snapped. "You don't understand. None of you understand." "I understand more than you know," Wellington said. "I have a daughter. Every time I deploy, I see the fear in her eyes. The question of whether I'll come home." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And I've lost soldiers under my command, young men and women I was responsible for. Each death weighs on me every single day." Kendrick's hands shook. "Pretty words. That's all you generals have. Pretty words to justify sending our kids to die." "No words can justify the loss of a child," Wellington replied, "or ease that pain. But right now I'm trying to prevent more deaths. The information I'm carrying could save hundreds of lives. both military and civilian. That's why I need to make that phone call." "More lies," Kendrick said, but her voice wavered. "You're just trying to manipulate me." "Patricia," Torres stepped closer. "Look at his eyes. He's telling the truth." Kendrick looked at Wellington, really looked at him for the first time since pulling him over. She saw beyond her prejudice and grief to the responsibility etched in his features, the genuine concern in his expression. "My son trusted his commanders," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He believed in the mission, and they let him die." "I know sorry isn't enough," Wellington responded. "Nothing can fill the void left by losing a child. But I give you my word. The mission I'm on right now is about protecting other mothers' sons and daughters. Please let me make that call." Tears welled in Kendrick's eyes, though she fought to hold them back. The handcuffs trembled in her grip as years of bottled grief and anger warred with the truth she saw in Wellington's face. "How do I know you're not lying?" she asked, but the hostile edge had left her voice. "How can I trust anything you say?" "Because I've carried the same burden you carry," Wellington said. "The weight of loss, the questions that never get answered, the pain that never fully heals. But we have a choice in how we honor those we've lost. We can let our grief destroy us, or we can use it to protect others from experiencing the same pain." A tear finally escaped, rolling down Kendrick's cheek. Her shoulders sagged as if the armor of anger she'd worn for so long had suddenly become too heavy to bear. Torres gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Partner, we need to do the right thing here." Kendrick looked down at the phone in her hand, then at the memorial bracelet on her wrist. The setting sun caught the engraving, making her son's name shine briefly. "Michael always wanted to help people," she said quietly. "That's why he enlisted. He believed in serving something bigger than himself." She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "I've been dishonoring that by letting my grief turn into hate, haven't I?" The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with the possibility of either redemption or further descent into bitterness. The choice lay in Kendrick's hands, along with Wellington's phone and the fate of his crucial mission. The crackle of a police radio broke the tense silence. "Dispatch, this is Officer Kendrick, requesting supervisor assistance at my location." Her voice trembled slightly as she made the call, her knuckles white against the radio. General Wellington stood quietly by his rental car, his military training evident in his controlled breathing and steady gaze. The young officer Torres shifted uncomfortably beside his patrol car, looking anywhere but at the unfolding scene. Within minutes, the distinctive rumble of an approaching police cruiser drew their attention. The vehicle pulled up smoothly, its lights off but engine purring. A stocky man with salt and pepper hair stepped out, his sergeant's stripes catching the morning sun. His weathered face tightened as he took in the scene, recognition and pain flashing in his eyes as they met Kendrick's. "Rick," Kendrick said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Patricia," Sergeant Hoffman responded, professional but strained. "What's the situation here?" Wellington watched the exchange with keen interest, noting the undercurrent of familiarity and tension between the two officers. Torres straightened up, clearly uncomfortable with the revelation that his training officer and the responding sergeant shared a personal history. "This man," Kendrick gestured sharply toward Wellington, "claims to be some kind of general. Says he's got urgent military business. But the rental doesn't check out, and his story's full of holes." Hoffman approached Wellington, his eyes taking in the general's bearing and demeanor. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Rick Hoffman. Could you explain your side of the situation?" Before Wellington could respond, Kendrick cut in, her voice rising. "Don't tell me you're buying into this, Rick. After what they did to Michael." She stopped abruptly, pain etching deep lines around her mouth. The air seemed to freeze between them. Wellington watched as Hoffman's professional facade cracked slightly, grief shadowing his features. "Patricia," he said quietly, "Michael has nothing to do with this traffic stop." "Michael has everything to do with it," Kendrick's voice cracked. "These high-ranking military types sending our boy into that death trap and then having the nerve to call it acceptable losses." Her hands shook as she pointed at Wellington. "They sit in their offices making decisions that get our children killed." Wellington's heart ached as the family tragedy unfolded before him. The bitter divorce, the shared grief of losing their son. It all painted a clear picture of why this traffic stop had escalated so dramatically. Hoffman stepped closer to his ex-wife, speaking low enough that only she and Wellington could hear. "We can't keep doing this, Patricia. Michael wouldn't want us tearing ourselves apart like this." "Don't you dare tell me what our son would want." Kendrick's voice rose again, thick with emotion. "You moved on, Rick. Got yourself a new life, a new family. I'm the only one who still remembers." "That's not fair, and you know it," Hoffman replied, his professional composure slipping further. "I remember every single day. I just chose not to let the grief destroy what's left of my life." Wellington watched the exchange silently, noting how Torres had retreated even further from the scene, giving the family their privacy. The general's trained eye caught the slight tremor in Hoffman's hands, the way Kendrick's shoulders hunched protectively, the matching pain in both their eyes when they spoke of their son. "Your son," Wellington spoke softly, drawing their attention. "What unit was he with?" Kendrick's eyes flashed dangerously, but Hoffman answered, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Afghanistan." Wellington nodded solemnly. "I knew good men in that unit, brave men." "Don't," Kendrick warned, but her voice had lost some of its earlier venom. "Don't pretend you knew anything about my boy." Wellington kept his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not pretending, Officer Kendrick. I've lost men under my command. Good soldiers, someone's children, someone's loved ones. The weight of those losses." He paused, meeting both parents' eyes in turn. "It never gets lighter." The admission hung in the air between them. Hoffman's posture softened slightly, while Kendrick seemed to struggle with conflicting emotions. Wellington could see his words had struck a chord, but the grief and anger that had driven Kendrick's actions were deeply rooted. Time was still ticking away, and Wellington needed to complete his mission. But he understood now that this moment wasn't just about a racist traffic stop or a critical intelligence delivery. It was about a family shattered by war, about parents trying to navigate the impossible landscape of losing a child, about grief expressing itself as anger because the pain was too great to bear any other way. Hoffman cleared his throat, visibly pulling himself back into his professional role. "Patricia, I need to review the initial reason for this stop. Can you walk me through your probable cause?" Wellington glanced at his watch, noting the time with practiced precision. Through the tense family drama unfolding before him, he'd been counting down the minutes, waiting for exactly this moment. He turned to Sergeant Hoffman with newfound urgency in his voice. "Sergeant, I need to make one phone call. It's critical." Kendrick scoffed, but Hoffman raised his hand to quiet her. "Sir, given the circumstances—" "This isn't about my detention," Wellington interrupted firmly. "Lives are at stake. I need 5 minutes on a secure line." Something in Wellington's tone made Hoffman pause. The sergeant studied the general's face, recognizing the gravity in his expression. After a moment's consideration, he pulled out his own phone and handed it over. "Use mine," Hoffman said, ignoring Kendrick's sound of protest. Wellington took the phone and dialed a long string of numbers from memory. His posture shifted subtly, the casual civilian demeanor falling away to reveal the 3-star general beneath. When he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of command. "Authorization code Tango 749 Echo Delta. This is General Wellington. Put me through to CENTCOM immediately." He paused, listening. "Confirmed. Implementing Operation Shadowbreak. Lock down the entire region. I repeat, full lockdown effective immediately." Kendrick and Hoffman exchanged confused looks while Torres straightened up, suddenly alert. Wellington continued speaking into the phone, his voice steady and authoritative. "The situation is as we suspected. Local police frequencies are compromised. The target has been monitoring all communications, waiting for my arrival." He glanced at Kendrick, his expression softening slightly. An unexpected traffic stop provided the perfect cover. The target lost my trail when Officer Kendrick confiscated my phone and detained me. Understanding dawned on Hoffman's face as Wellington continued. "They're watching the police bands, trying to track my movements. Instead, they've been listening to a routine traffic stop that's gone longer than expected. Our counterterrorism units should be in position by now." Kendrick's face had drained of color as she listened. Her hands, which had been clenched in fists of anger moments before, now hung loose at her sides. Torres had moved closer, his earlier discomfort replaced by alert attention. "Confirm that strike teams Alpha through Delta are in position," Wellington ordered into the phone. "Once the lockdown is initiated, we'll have a 45-minute window to neutralize the threat." He paused, listening. "Understood." Wellington out. He handed the phone back to Hoffman, who accepted it with a look of newfound respect. "General," the sergeant said quietly, "how long have you known they were monitoring police frequencies?" "We've suspected it for weeks," Wellington replied. "They've been waiting for me to arrive with the intelligence package. They knew I was coming to my daughter's wedding rehearsal. It was the perfect opportunity for them to intercept me." He turned to Kendrick, his voice gentle but firm. "Your traffic stop, Officer Kendrick, however misguided its motivation, may have saved countless lives today." Kendrick's face showed a complex mix of emotions: embarrassment, confusion, and a hint of relief that her actions had inadvertently helped rather than hindered. "But your rental car," she began weakly, "was deliberately chosen to be unremarkable," Wellington finished, "just as I chose to wear civilian clothes and travel alone. We needed them to think I was vulnerable, easy to intercept. What we didn't count on was a traffic stop throwing off their surveillance." Torres stepped forward, his voice tight with concern. "Sir, if they're monitoring our frequencies, won't they know now that this was a setup?" Wellington shook his head. "This phone call was made on a secure line, scrambled and routed through multiple channels. To anyone monitoring police bands, this still looks like nothing more than a prolonged traffic stop with an uncooperative suspect." Hoffman's tactical mind was already working through the implications. "The terrorist attack scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Was a feint," Wellington confirmed. "They're in position now, thinking they have the advantage of surprise. Instead, we have them surrounded, and they don't even know it." The gravity of the situation settled over the small group. What had begun as a racially motivated traffic stop had transformed into something far more complex, a crucial piece in a counter-terrorism operation that would save hundreds of lives. Kendrick looked at Wellington, really looked at him for the first time since pulling him over. Gone was the bitter anger that had clouded her vision, replaced by a dawning understanding of how her own prejudices and pain had nearly clouded her judgment. The man she had dismissed and demeaned was actually a high-ranking military officer who had just turned her mistake into a tactical advantage. "General," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She trailed off, unable to find the right words to express her remorse. Wellington held up his hand. "Officer Kendrick, we're not done here. Right now, I need all of you to maintain your current positions and continue exactly as you have been. The operation depends on keeping up appearances for just a little while longer." The four of them stood in the morning sun, the seemingly routine traffic stop now revealed as a crucial moment in a much larger operation. The weight of their unexpected roles in this counter-terrorism mission settled over them, transforming their understanding of everything that had transpired in the last hour. Wellington kept his hands visible on the hood of the patrol car, maintaining the appearance of a detained civilian, while his mind raced through tactical calculations. The morning sun beat down on the quiet street as he watched Hoffman speak into his radio, coordinating with dispatch about the prolonged traffic stop. "Dispatch Unit 17, still investigating suspicious vehicle and occupant on Oak Street," Hoffman reported, following standard procedure. Wellington allowed himself a small smile. Every routine communication on the police band helped reinforce their cover. He could almost picture the terrorist cell monitoring these transmissions, believing their target was conveniently delayed by local law enforcement. Officer Torres stood nearby, his posture tense as he observed the situation with growing curiosity. The young officer's eyes darted between Wellington and the senior officers, clearly sensing that something wasn't adding up. Wellington caught his gaze and gave an almost imperceptible nod, causing Torres to straighten slightly. Kendrick paced near her patrol car, her earlier aggression somewhat deflated but still wrestling with her emotions. She kept glancing at her ex-husband, then at Wellington, clearly struggling to process the shifting dynamics of the situation. Wellington coughed quietly, drawing Hoffman's attention. "Sergeant," he said in a low voice, "I need you to call in one more unit. Make it sound routine." Hoffman hesitated, then nodded, understanding that something larger was at play. He keyed his radio again. "Dispatch, requesting additional unit for traffic stop assistance." "Copy that, 17. Unit 23 responding." Wellington shifted his weight, using the movement to scan the surrounding buildings. He spotted what he was looking for, a glint of metal on a rooftop 3 blocks away. One of his surveillance teams was in position, using the extended traffic stop as cover to move into place. "Officer Torres," Wellington called out softly, "would you mind checking my vehicle registration again?" "Take your time about it." Torres moved toward the rental car, his movements deliberately slow and methodical. As he passed Wellington, the general whispered, "Watch the brown sedan 2 blocks north. Don't make it obvious." The young officer's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his casual demeanor as he made his way to the rental car. Wellington knew Torres had noticed something was different about this stop, and his quick professional response confirmed Wellington's assessment of his character. Kendrick approached Wellington, her voice lower and less hostile than before. "I still need to verify your military credentials," she said, though the words lacked their earlier bite. "Of course, officer," Wellington replied clearly, knowing his voice would carry on any surveillance equipment monitoring police frequencies. "My service records will take some time to confirm. I understand the need to be thorough." He watched as another unmarked vehicle drove past slowly, more of his team moving into position while maintaining the illusion of normal traffic. The terrorist cell had chosen this small town specifically because they thought it would be easy to track and intercept him here. Instead, their own surveillance of police channels had trapped them in an ever-tightening net. Hoffman returned to stand near his ex-wife, their shared history creating a palpable tension. "Patricia," he said quietly, "maybe we should—" "Don't," she cut him off, but without the anger that had fueled her earlier outbursts. Her grief over their son still hung in the air between them, but something about the situation had begun to shift her perspective. Wellington checked his watch again. His teams would need another 20 minutes to get into their final positions. He needed to keep the traffic stop going without arousing suspicion. "Sergeant," he said, pitching his voice to carry normally on police frequencies, "I understand your concerns about my rental agreement. Perhaps we could contact the agency directly?" Hoffman played along, responding with professional detachment. "That would be appropriate, sir. We'll need to verify all documentation thoroughly." Torres returned from the rental car, moving with careful precision. As he passed Wellington, he murmured, "Brown sedan has 2 occupants. They haven't moved since I started watching." Wellington gave a slight nod. That would be part of the terrorist cell's surveillance team, waiting for him to continue toward the military installation. They had no idea they were already surrounded. The general felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same steadiness that had carried him through countless operations. Every piece was falling into place. His teams were using the extended traffic stop as cover to move into position, while the terrorist cell remained focused on monitoring police communications for any sign that their target was about to continue his journey. What they were hearing instead was the frustrating but mundane sound of small-town police procedure. Radio checks, verification requests, and the back and forth of officers dealing with a routine traffic stop that had become complicated by questions of identity and documentation. Wellington caught sight of another tactical team moving into position, their presence completely masked by the attention focused on the traffic stop. In trying to track his movements, the terrorists had fallen into a trap of their own making. Their reliance on monitoring police frequencies had made them blind to the military operation now surrounding them. All he needed to do was maintain this careful balance for a few minutes more, keeping up appearances while his teams moved the final pieces into place. The very prejudice that had caused Kendrick to pull him over had become an unexpected asset, creating the perfect cover for a counter-terrorism operation. Wellington's earpiece crackled with an urgent whisper from his tactical team. "Sir, Surveillance shows multiple vehicles converging on the police station. They think you've been transported there. Hostile force estimated at 12 to 15 combatants. His jaw tightened as he processed this development. The terrorist cell had lost track of him during the traffic stop and jumped to the wrong conclusion. Now, innocent police officers at the station would be caught in the crossfire. Still maintaining his position against the patrol car, Wellington glanced at the 3 officers nearby. Kendrick stood with her arms crossed, her earlier anger replaced by uncertainty. Hoffman kept checking his radio while Torres maintained his watch on the suspicious brown sedan. Another transmission came through Wellington's concealed earpiece. "Sir, hostiles are heavily armed. They're 5 minutes out from the station. Rules of engagement?" Wellington faced an impossible choice. Maintaining his cover might protect the larger operation, but it would leave the station's officers defenseless. The weight of command pressed down on him as he thought of the men and women who had no idea they were about to be attacked. He straightened up, drawing surprised looks from the officers. "Sergeant Hoffman," he said in his command voice, dropping all pretense of being a detained civilian. "I need you to call the station immediately. Tell them to implement lockdown procedures. They're about to be hit by a terrorist assault team." Hoffman's hand moved to his weapon. "What are you talking about?" "There's no time to explain everything," Wellington said, pulling his military ID from his jacket. "I'm General Timothy Wellington, United States Army. A terrorist cell has been tracking me, planning to intercept classified intelligence. They've lost my location and believe I'm being held at your station. They're moving to attack now." Kendrick stepped forward, her face a mix of disbelief and growing alarm. "You expect us to believe?" A burst of gunfire interrupted her, shattering the windows of the brown sedan Torres had been watching. 2 men burst out, weapons raised, but were immediately dropped by precise shots from Wellington's hidden surveillance team. "Get down!" Wellington shouted, pulling Kendrick behind her patrol car as more shots rang out. Torres and Hoffman dove for cover as additional terrorists emerged from hiding spots along the street. Wellington pulled a compact radio from his jacket. "All units engage. Protect the officers and maintain perimeter." His tactical teams emerged from their positions, their practiced movements catching the terrorists in a crossfire. "Sergeant," Wellington called to Hoffman, "make that call now. The station needs to lock down immediately." Hoffman grabbed his radio, relaying the warning while Kendrick stared at Wellington with wide eyes. The sound of gunfire and shouting filled the street as Wellington's teams engaged the terrorist forces. "Torres," Wellington commanded, "there's a rifle in my rental car's trunk. The code is 2471. The young officer nodded and crawled toward the vehicle while Wellington provided covering fire with a handgun he'd concealed in an ankle holster. Kendrick found her voice. "All this time you were running a military operation?" "Your traffic stop actually helped us," Wellington explained, checking his ammunition. "They were tracking me through police frequencies, expecting me to head straight to the installation. When you pulled me over, it disrupted their surveillance and gave my teams time to move into position." More gunfire erupted from down the street as another group of terrorists tried to flank their position. Wellington's teams responded with precise shots, their superior training evident in their coordination. Torres returned with the rifle, which Wellington quickly assembled. "Hoffman, call for backup. We need to coordinate with local law enforcement to protect the station." He turned to Kendrick, his voice softening slightly. "Officer, I know you've lost faith in military leadership, but right now I need your help to save your fellow officers." Kendrick met his gaze, years of grief and anger warring with her duty as a police officer. Finally, she nodded, drawing her weapon. "What do you need us to do?" Wellington quickly outlined defensive positions, coordinating with his teams through the radio. The terrorist cell had committed their forces to the attack, believing they could overwhelm the police station's defenses. Instead, they found themselves caught between Wellington's prepared forces and responding local law enforcement. "Sir," came another transmission through his earpiece. "Second team reports hostiles attempting to circle around through the park." "Understood," Wellington responded, then turned to the officers. "They're trying to flank through the park. We need to hold this position while my teams cut off their escape route." The sound of approaching sirens mixed with continued gunfire as local backup responded to Hoffman's call. Wellington coordinated between his tactical teams and the local officers, working to contain the threat while minimizing risk to civilians. A bullet struck the patrol car near Kendrick's head, and Wellington pulled her down just in time. Their eyes met briefly, and he saw the moment she fully accepted the reality of their situation. Gone was the bitter officer from the traffic stop, replaced by a professional focused on protecting her community. "General," she said, checking her weapon, "I owe you an apology." "Later," Wellington replied, spotting movement across the street. "Right now, we need to stop these terrorists before they can hurt anyone else." The battle for the streets of Millbrook intensified as Wellington's carefully planned counter-terrorism operation transformed into an active defense against desperate enemies. The safety of the entire town now hung in the balance, with 3 local officers and a 3-star general standing as the first line of defense. Through the shattered windows of the police station, Wellington watched as 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt in the parking lot. The terrorists wasted no time, immediately opening fire on the building with automatic weapons. "Everyone down!" Wellington shouted, pulling Kendrick behind a desk as bullets tore through the front windows. Glass exploded inward, raining down on the officers scrambling for cover. Torres dove behind a filing cabinet, his eyes wide with shock. "What's happening?" "Those men out there are part of a terrorist cell," Wellington explained, his voice steady despite the chaos. "They've been tracking me, trying to intercept classified intelligence about their planned attack on the military installation." He pulled out his military ID and handed it to Hoffman. "I'm General Timothy Wellington, United States Army. I've been coordinating a counter-terrorism operation, and now we need to work together to defend this position." Hoffman examined the ID, ducking as another burst of gunfire peppered the walls. "You're really a 3-star general?" "Yes, and right now we need to secure this building." Wellington pulled out his concealed radio. "All units, this is Bull 6. Police station is under attack. Move to support positions and prepare to engage." He turned to the officers. "I have tactical teams in place, but they'll need time to maneuver. We have to hold out." Kendrick stared at Wellington, her earlier hostility replaced by a mix of shock and dawning comprehension. All this time, during the traffic stop, "Your detention actually helped disrupt their surveillance," Wellington said, checking his ammunition. "But now we need to focus on survival. Officer Kendrick, how many officers are in the building?" She snapped back to professional mode. 6 on duty plus dispatch. Hoffman, get on the radio, call every available unit for backup. Torres, help me barricade these entrances." Wellington's commanding presence took over naturally, and the others responded to his authority without hesitation. They worked quickly, pushing desks and filing cabinets to block the doors while more officers arrived to help. The sound of gunfire was constant now, punctuated by the terrorists shouting orders outside. "General," came a voice through Wellington's radio, "Team 2 in position on the north side. Team 3 moving to cut off their escape route." "Copy that," Wellington responded. "Maintain perimeter, but do not engage until my signal. We need to ensure civilian safety first." A massive explosion rocked the building's side entrance. Smoke poured in as terrorists tried to breach the door. 2 officers returned fire through the windows, forcing the attackers back. "They're trying to flank us," Torres called out, spotting movement on the security cameras. Wellington moved to the young officer's position, studying the monitors. "Kendrick, take 2 officers and secure the back corridor. Hoffman, coordinate with dispatch to evacuate any civilians in the area." Kendrick hesitated for a moment, looking at Wellington. The man she'd detained and accused hours earlier was now commanding their defense with calm efficiency. "General, I'm sorry about before." "Later, Officer Kendrick," Wellington said firmly but not unkindly. "Right now, I need your experience protecting that corridor." She nodded sharply and moved out, calling 2 officers to follow her. Wellington returned to coordinating with his tactical teams, setting up a controlled response to the assault. "Sir," Torres reported, "local SWAT is 10 minutes out." "We'll hold," Wellington assured him. "My teams are moving into position. We just need to—" He was cut off by another explosion, this one larger than the first. The terrorists had breached the side entrance. Smoke filled the hallway as multiple attackers pushed forward, firing blindly into the building. Wellington and Torres returned fire, forcing them back momentarily. "All units execute containment plan," Wellington commanded into his radio. Outside, his tactical teams began engaging the terrorists from multiple angles, catching them in a crossfire between the building and the prepared military positions. Kendrick's voice crackled over the police radio. "General, we've got movement in the back lot. At least 4 hostiles trying to access the rear door." "Hold your position," Wellington responded. "Team 3, move to support the rear entrance, create a buffer zone, and prevent any breach." The battle intensified as Wellington's forces engaged the terrorists from all sides. Inside the station, officers maintained defensive positions while the general coordinated both military and police responses. His calm command presence helped steady the officers as the firefight continued. Through it all, Wellington noticed the change in Kendrick's behavior. The bitter, angry officer from the traffic stop had transformed into a focused professional, following his orders without question. Her earlier prejudices seemed forgotten in the face of the real threat. "SWAT units arriving now," Hoffman reported, still manning the dispatch radio. "They're coordinating with your teams, General." Wellington nodded, directing his forces to create safe corridors for the SWAT teams to move in. The terrorists found themselves increasingly pinned down, caught between the defending officers, Wellington's tactical teams, and now the arriving SWAT units. "All teams maintain pressure," Wellington commanded. "We've got them contained. Now we just need to hold until—" Another explosion cut him off, and the battle for the police station entered its next phase. The firefight intensified as the terrorists pressed their assault from multiple directions. Bullets riddled the police station walls, while Wellington coordinated the defense from behind an overturned metal desk. He kept his radio close, directing his tactical teams to maintain pressure on the attackers. "East corridor clear," Torres reported, ducking back from his position near the windows. Despite his rookie status, he'd shown remarkable composure under fire, methodically checking sight lines and returning fire with precision. Hoffman maintained his post at the dispatch desk, coordinating with incoming police units while stealing glances at his ex-wife. The sight of Kendrick following Wellington's orders with professional focus stirred complicated emotions in him. Just hours ago, she'd been treating the general like a criminal, and now they were fighting for their lives together. A sudden burst of automatic fire shattered the relative calm. 3 terrorists had breached the side entrance, catching Wellington exposed as he moved between cover positions. Kendrick saw the threat first. "General, look out!" she shouted, launching herself forward. She slammed into Wellington, pushing him behind a concrete pillar just as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. But her momentum carried her into the open, and she caught 2 rounds in her left shoulder before she could roll to safety. "Officer down!" Wellington called out, immediately returning fire at the attackers while crawling toward Kendrick's position. The terrorists retreated under his accurate shots, buying precious seconds. Kendrick lay against the wall, blood seeping through her uniform. "Guess we're even now," she managed through gritted teeth, her face pale but determined. "Stay with me, officer," Wellington said, quickly examining her wounds while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. He pulled out a compact medical kit from his jacket. "These don't look too deep, but we need to stop the bleeding." Torres provided cover fire while Wellington worked, his young face set with fierce concentration. "More movement outside, sir. They're regrouping for another push." "Hoffman, status on those reinforcements?" Wellington called out, applying pressure bandages to Kendrick's shoulder. "Military quick reaction forces 10 minutes out," Hoffman responded, his voice tight with worry as he watched Wellington tend to his ex-wife. The same military leadership he and Kendrick had blamed for their son's death was now fighting to save her life. Kendrick looked up at Wellington, her eyes clouded with pain and something deeper. "Why?" she whispered. "After how I treated you." "Because it's what we do," Wellington replied simply, securing the bandage. "We protect each other, regardless of past actions or personal feelings. That's what your son understood when he served." Tears welled in Kendrick's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I've been so angry for so long, blamed everyone in uniform for losing him, but you're nothing like I assumed." "Incoming!" Torres shouted as more terrorists pushed through the breach. Wellington shielded Kendrick with his body while returning fire one-handed. His other hand kept pressure on her wound. Hoffman moved from his position, joining Torres in defending their position. His police training merged with years of pent-up emotion as he engaged the attackers threatening his former family. "Nobody else dies today," he growled, each shot carefully placed. Wellington's radio crackled. "General, this is Quick Reaction Force Actual. 5 minutes out. Can you hold?" "We'll hold," Wellington responded firmly, checking Kendrick's bandages. "Officer Kendrick bought us the time we needed. We're not wasting her sacrifice." "Not planning on sacrificing anything else today, General," Kendrick said, her voice stronger as she drew her backup weapon with her good arm. "Still got one good shoulder to shoot with." Wellington nodded with approval, helping her into a better firing position while maintaining cover. Together, they engaged the terrorists attempting to flank their position, working in synchronized bursts of fire. Torres moved to support them, his earlier uncertainty replaced by focused determination. He'd found his courage under fire, proving himself worthy of the badge he carried. "Multiple targets retreating, sir. They're falling back." "They hear the reinforcements coming," Wellington confirmed, the distant sound of helicopters growing louder. "Just need to hold a few more minutes." Hoffman coordinated with the approaching military units, his dispatcher's voice steady despite the chaos. The man he'd initially seen as a threat to his ex-wife had become their lifeline, leading them through the crisis with unwavering courage and compassion. "General," Kendrick said during a brief lull in the fighting, her face showing both pain and revelation. "I was wrong about everything. About you, about the uniform, about what happened to my son. He'd be ashamed of how I've acted." "He'd be proud of how you're fighting now," Wellington assured her, checking her bandages again. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us the truth about ourselves and others." The sound of military helicopters grew louder as the Quick Reaction Force closed in. The terrorists' attacks became more desperate, but less coordinated as they realized their window of opportunity was closing. Wellington maintained his calm command presence, directing the defense while ensuring Kendrick's wounds were stable. The barriers of prejudice and bitter history crumbled in the face of shared danger and mutual respect, forged in the crucible of combat. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors grew deafening as 3 military choppers descended around the police station. Ropes unfurled from their sides, and heavily armed soldiers rappelled down with practiced precision. Wellington maintained radio contact, directing the Quick Reaction Force to key positions, while Torres and Hoffman continued providing cover fire. "QRF teams, be advised. Hostiles concentrated in the east and south quadrants," Wellington called into his radio. "Police personnel marked with blue bands. Watch your fire." The terrorists' coordinated assault dissolved into chaos as military forces engaged them from multiple angles. Professional soldiers moved with lethal efficiency, clearing sectors and eliminating threats. The sound of gunfire shifted from desperate exchanges to controlled bursts as the QRF teams systematically neutralized the enemy fighters. "Station perimeter secure," crackled a voice over Wellington's radio. "All hostile forces contained or eliminated. Medical teams inbound." Kendrick leaned against the wall, her wounded shoulder professionally bandaged but still causing obvious pain. Wellington kept a steadying hand on her good arm while monitoring the clearing operation. Despite the immediate danger passing, something in his expression suggested a heavy weight still burdened him. Military medics rushed into the station, quickly triaging the wounded. As they worked on Kendrick's shoulder, Wellington stood nearby, his usual commanding presence softened by what appeared to be deep personal conflict. "Officer Kendrick," he said quietly, once the medics had stabilized her wound. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been carrying since I first saw your name tag today." Hoffman moved closer, sensing the gravity in Wellington's tone. Torres respectfully stepped back, but remained within earshot, aware he was witnessing something significant. "I knew your son, James," Wellington continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I was there that day in Afghanistan." Kendrick's face went pale, her good hand gripping the edge of the medical gurney. You knew Jimmy?" Wellington nodded slowly. "He was assigned to my security detail during a critical intelligence operation. We were ambushed by insurgents in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Your son—" He paused, collecting himself. "Your son saved my life." The room fell completely silent except for the distant sound of military operations outside. Hoffman moved to stand beside his ex-wife, his hand finding hers almost unconsciously. "We were pinned down by heavy fire," Wellington continued. "I was wounded, unable to move. James could have retreated to safety with the rest of the team, but he wouldn't leave me behind. He provided covering fire, allowing the medics to reach my position. That's when—" Wellington's voice cracked slightly. "That's when the mortar round hit." Kendrick's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from Wellington's face. "They never told us the details, just that he died in combat." "He died a hero," Wellington said firmly. "The intelligence we gathered that day helped prevent 3 major attacks on civilian targets. Hundreds of lives were saved because of your son's sacrifice. I've carried that debt ever since." Hoffman's grip on Kendrick's hand tightened. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "The operation was classified," Wellington explained. "But I've thought about James every day since then. When I saw your name today, recognized you from the photo he kept." He shook his head. "I wanted to tell you immediately, but the terrorist surveillance meant I couldn't break cover without risking more lives." Kendrick's tears flowed freely now. "All this time I've been so angry. Blamed the military, blamed the leadership, blamed you, without even knowing you." She looked down at her wounded shoulder. "And then today?" "Today you showed the same courage your son did," Wellington said gently. "The same willingness to put yourself at risk to protect others. The same heart that made him a hero." "He used to write about his commanding officer," Hoffman said suddenly, recognition dawning. "The Bull. That's what they called you. He said you were the kind of leader who never asked his men to take risks he wouldn't take himself." Wellington nodded, emotion clear in his eyes. James was the kind of soldier every commander prays for. Brave, dedicated, selfless. He made the ultimate sacrifice not just for me, but for every life his actions helped save. Kendrick's body shook with quiet sobs. "I've dishonored his memory. The way I've acted, the hatred I've carried." "No," Wellington said firmly. "You were a mother in pain. But today, when it mattered most, you showed what you're really made of. The same thing your son showed. That character reveals itself in our choices, especially under fire." Medical teams continued working around them, treating the wounded and securing the scene. But in that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, something profound was healing. The barriers of grief, prejudice, and misunderstanding began to crumble in the face of shared truth and sacrifice. "General," Kendrick said, wiping her eyes, "I need you to tell me everything about that day, about Jimmy. I need to know how my son lived his last moments." "I'll tell you everything," Wellington promised. "Every detail I can share. He deserves to have his full story told, and you deserve to hear it." Wellington reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a worn envelope. The edges were softened from years of careful handling. The paper yellowed with age. His fingers trembled slightly as he held it. "James gave this to me the day before." He cleared his throat. "He asked me to deliver it personally, if anything happened to him. I've carried it ever since, waiting for the right moment." Kendrick stared at the envelope, her hands shaking as she reached for it. Her son's familiar handwriting spelled out "Mom" on the front, the sight of it bringing fresh tears to her eyes. Hoffman moved closer, his arm supporting her as she carefully opened the letter. The paper crinkled as she unfolded it, revealing pages filled with Jimmy's distinctive scrawl. She began to read aloud, her voice quavering. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I know that's going to hurt you more than anything, and I'm so sorry. But there are things I need you to know, things I should have said before I left. I understand now why you were so afraid when I enlisted. After Dad left the force and you two split up, I was all you had left. You'd already lost so much, and the thought of losing me too must have terrified you. The anger you showed wasn't really anger, it was fear and love all tangled up together. But Mom, I need you to know that joining the Army was the right choice for me. Here, I've found purpose. I'm protecting people who can't protect themselves. The General, Bull, as we call him, he's shown me what real leadership means. What it means to serve something bigger than yourself. If I don't make it back, please don't let grief poison your heart. Don't let anger win. You taught me about strength, about standing up for what's right. You showed me how to be brave long before I put on this uniform. I forgive you for the harsh words before I left. I understand now that they came from love, and I hope you can forgive me for causing you this pain. But Mom, most of all, I hope you can forgive yourself. You and Dad both carry so much hurt. Maybe my death will drive you further apart, but I'm hoping it might help you find your way back to each other. Not as husband and wife, but as two people who shared a life and a love that created me. Remember me with joy, not bitterness. Remember the little boy who wanted to be just like his cop parents, protecting people and doing what's right. That's still who I am, just in a different uniform. I love you, Mom. No matter what happens, no matter how this ends, that will never change. Your son, Jimmy. Kendrick's voice broke on the final words. She pressed the letter to her chest, decades of pent-up grief finally breaking free. Hoffman wrapped his arms around her, his own tears falling freely. He understood, she whispered. All this time, he understood. He was wise beyond his years, Wellington said softly. He talked about both of you often, always with love and respect. Kendrick turned to her ex-husband, really seeing him for the first time in years. Rick, I'm sorry. I've been so lost in my own pain. I couldn't see yours. Hoffman nodded, squeezing her hand. We both were. Maybe it's time we helped each other carry it instead of letting it tear us apart. Jimmy would have wanted that, she said, looking down at the letter again. He saw the truth even when we couldn't. The letter trembled in her hands, her son's final gift, a bridge across the chasm of grief that had separated her from everything she once held dear. In his words, she found not just forgiveness, but permission to forgive herself. The autumn sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the church's wooden pews. General Timothy Wellington stood tall in his full dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest as he waited outside the chapel doors. His daughter Catherine appeared in a flowing white gown, her eyes bright with happy tears. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She straightened his collar, smiling. "And you clean up pretty well yourself, Dad. Even after everything that happened yesterday." "Nothing could have kept me from this moment," he replied, offering his arm. As the wedding march began to play, Wellington caught sight of Patricia Kendrick sitting near the back of the church. She wore a simple blue dress, her ex-husband Rick Hoffman beside her. Their presence reminded him that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. The doors opened wide and Wellington felt his daughter's hand tighten on his arm. Together, they began their walk down the aisle. Each step carried the weight of history, both the struggles overcome and the joy of new beginnings. After the ceremony during the reception, Kendrick approached Wellington with a tentative smile. "Thank you for inviting us," she said. "It was a beautiful ceremony." "I'm glad you could come," he replied. "How are you doing?" "Taking it one day at a time," she admitted. "Started therapy last week. Rick's been supportive. We're talking again, really talking for the first time in years." "Jimmy would be proud," Wellington said gently. Kendrick nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "The memorial service is next weekend. Would you consider speaking?" "I'd be honored," he answered without hesitation. 1 week later, Wellington stood at a podium in the military cemetery, surrounded by a mix of uniforms, both military and law enforcement. American flags fluttered in the breeze as he began his eulogy. "Private First Class James Kendrick was more than just a soldier under my command," Wellington's voice carried across the gathered crowd. "He was a beacon of what's best in all of us, the son of 2 dedicated police officers who carried their spirit of service into military life. He looked out at the faces before him. Patricia and Rick Kendrick sitting together, his own daughter and new son-in-law, fellow officers and soldiers united in remembrance. Jimmy's last act was one of supreme sacrifice, pushing me out of the path of an explosion that took his life. But his greatest legacy isn't just how he died, it's how he lived. He believed in building bridges, in healing wounds, in finding common ground between people who seemed worlds apart. Wellington's voice grew stronger as he continued. In his final letter home, Jimmy wrote about forgiveness, about understanding, about hope. He saw past surface differences to recognize our shared humanity, and in doing so, he left us a roadmap for healing. Patricia Kendrick wiped tears from her eyes as Rick held her hand. Around them, police officers and military personnel stood shoulder to shoulder, barriers broken down by shared grief and respect. Today, we honor Jimmy not just as a fallen soldier, but as a son, a peacemaker, and a reminder that love is stronger than hate, that understanding can overcome prejudice, and that even in our darkest moments, grace can light the way forward. As Wellington concluded his speech, a gentle rain began to fall, not a downpour, but a soft cleansing shower that seemed to wash away the last traces of bitterness, leaving behind the promise of renewal and hope. Patricia Kendrick stood, supported by her ex-husband, and placed a white rose on her son's headstone. The simple gesture carried the weight of transformation, a mother's grief tempered by healing, a family broken but slowly mending, a community united by compassion and understanding. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.